Hello, welcome to today's edition of the Academy. Now we are going to continue our look at Sun Tzu's Art of War, Chapter 5. This is basically sentences 16 through 18. Now here Sun Tzu changes his focus slightly. He had been talking more about attacks, indirect attacks, and they talked about energy and decision. Now he's talking about order and disorder. And I like this piece because this is extremely important, but it's very hard to pull off, especially without practice. You have to have a clear head to do this one. Let me go ahead and we'll read the sentences and then we'll talk about them individually. Amid the turmoil and tumult of battle, there may be seeming disorder, and yet no real disorder at all. Amid confusion and chaos, your army may be without head or tail, yet it will be proof against defeat. Simulated disorder postulates perfect discipline. Simulated fear postulates courage. Simulated weakness postulates strength. Hiding order beneath the cloak of disorder is simply a question of subdivision. Concealing courage under a show of timidity presupposes a fund of latent energy. Masking strength with weakness is to be affected by tactical dispositions. Okay, so 3 sentences, there's a lot of meat in there. We'll just have to take one at a time because they're talking about slightly different things here. But the key here is the idea of being able to see disorder and cover it up, or I should say counter it. You want to actually display to the opponent what appears to be disorder, yet not have any disorder at all in your ranks. Now, in the case of the warfare Sun Tzu is used to, we're dealing with a lot of subunits, and when you break your army down into smaller units, disorder seems to be more likely. However, again, that's why discipline is extremely important. He'll talk about that in a couple sentences. And the communications and signals are so crucial because what looks like a multitude of individual units which may act on their own, there's a lot of possibilities for confusion to be sown. Now, that's not a good thing. Okay, you don't want your army to be in a state of confusion at all. So let's apply it to the tabletop. Obviously, our models aren't going to get confused. Now, our teammates might, but still, their models aren't going to get confused. So what is it we're going to do here with this sentence and the tabletop? Well, here we are going to do some psychological gaming with our opponent. What we want to do is make it appear to him or her that we don't have, well, I shouldn't say we don't have a plan, but we're not in control of the situation. That we don't have a concept of what needs to get done to accomplish our objective, that we're almost going willy-nilly along the table trying to just do whatever happens to come. Now in some games that's very hard to pull off. In other games it almost comes naturally because of the way that the objectives are set up. But what you as a general need to do is make it appear to your opponent that you don't have a coordinated effort, that your units just don't seem to be supporting each other when in fact they are. Now you can do that by putting them in different positions. You can do that by alternating their order of movement or fire to kind of hide or disguise patterns that you're trying to set up to where you can actually converge fire, for example, or bring a bunch of units that are not together at the time all in on an objective at the same moment, right? Make it look like they're separate and uncoordinated and suddenly fall on the opponent. Okay, so that's what we can do in that particular case of order versus disorder. Now, this is actually, I wasn't thinking in terms of on the tabletop. I'm thinking in terms of the battlefield. I can see this one play out through a lot of histories of different wars or battles. But when he's talking about simulated disorder postulates discipline, meaning it presupposes, it means you've got some discipline in place. Simulated fear postulates courage. In order to act fearful, you need to actually be courageous. And simulated weakness presupposes strength. You have to know your strengths to expose what looks like weaknesses or make yourself look weak in order to bait your opponent. So in each of these cases, we're talking about, on the tabletop, the general knowledge of himself. Okay, you need to be able to have the discipline to know how you're going to coordinate your army, and then mask that coordination. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of imagination sometimes. I'm not the best at that, obviously. You've seen my better reports, but I do try to incorporate that as much as possible. Now, the simulated fear, this actually, you can actually, again, a psychological game you can play with your opponent. You can act like you're getting frustrated. You can act like you're getting panicked. But again, it presupposes courage. Means in order for you to pull that off, you actually need to have a self-discipline, that a confidence that you can actually manage through this, whatever setbacks that appear to be there. There's a lot of gamers who they take a reversal early in the game, they kind of give up. And then you see there are a lot of examples where what looks like a loss on turn 1 ends up being a victory on turn 5. So for the opponent. So it's a case of, if you know what you're capable of, what your army can do versus your opponent, and you have the confidence to withstand that pressure of things going wrong, you can act or pretend like you are panicky. You can pretend like you're afraid of the outcome. You can pretend like you've given up when in fact you haven't. And then finally, simulated weakness postulates strength. So putting your units in a situation where they look like they're weaker than they are, or making it look like they're not supporting each other, whatever it takes to make the opponent think your units are weaker than they actually are, or that you hide your army's true strength, whatever that happens to be within the rule set you're playing. That's what you're trying to accomplish. But in order to do that, you have to know your army. That's extremely important. You, in fact, to do that really well, you need to not only know your army, but know how your army is acting and how it behaves in relation to your opponents. That takes a lot of discipline, a lot of practice, a lot of study of your opponent's codexes, your opponent's rule sets, or what have you. Sometimes it's a lot of work, not necessarily a lot of fun. But so if you're really wanting to compete and do really well, then you can apply sentence 17 to yourself as the general instead of applying it to your models. Okay, I think it's a very, very good way to basically competitive play here. I like one of the comments. There was a some early Chinese commenter said his name is Tumu, and he basically said this: if you wish to feign confusion in order to lure the enemy on, you must first have perfect discipline. If you wish to display timidity in order to entrap the enemy, you must have extreme courage. So see, this is a theme, and in order for you to pull this off, you really have to display that to your opponent. So it's a mind game, I'll admit, but in a competitive scenario, that's a lot of what this is. Okay, in a friendly game, you can actually use that to enhance the entertainment value. Okay, go ahead when things go bad, act out the panic or whatever, but just make sure you don't let it get to your head where it starts to psych you out. All right, so anyway, continuing though, this is kind of 18. I like the way he's done. He's given, again, 3 examples. Hiding order beneath the cloak of disorder is simply a question of subdivision. So in other words, with all your units separated, use them individually. Make it look like they're not working together. That's how you do it. If you have one large mob, obviously it's going to move in unison and what have you. But instead of having a mob, you have separate, smaller units. You can move them discreetly, separately, apart from each other, and make it look like they're not coordinated. And it masks your intentions and how well you've actually organized your offensive. Concealing courage under a show of timidity. Again, it's basically it's the same thing he said before. One of the things, though, is that masking strength with weakness is to be affected by tactile dispositions. That one piece of that last sentence, I think, is key to understanding how you put this on the tabletop. When you put your units, array your units out on the field, or put them in reserves, or wherever they're going to be within the context of the battle, where you put them has a lot to do with maximizing your strengths, exposing or making it appear that you're weak in certain areas. For example, we'll use this quick one. Setting your units up in the deployment time at the beginning of the game, further back, with maybe fewer units, most of them coming in as reserves, let's say from the flanks or what have you. You have a weaker front, it appears, because you have fewer units, and they're further back, so that encourages the enemy to come forward, because you're trying to keep your distance, timidity there. And now they've moved up, hopefully in a little bit of disorder, because he's not been able to accommodate the terrain effects against his lines. Then you bring in your reserves and your hopefully overwhelming forces, and come in and deliver a strong, healthy blow. Complete courage. You're not really being timid. You weren't actually holding back at the back, trying to protect yourself and worried that you're going to fall apart. You're there just encouraging your opponent to come forward, expose themselves, so you can strike them with everything you have. That's kind of what he's getting at here. So, those are the three sentences, 16 through 18. A whole new concept within this energy chapter. So think about it. Again, I really encourage you to get your own copy to read through it. And I hate to use the word meditate on it, but just think on it, study on it, see how you'd apply it to the tabletop. Again, look at different commenters, and if you can, especially find a commenter or commentary that actually talks about what other commentators have said, because you will see patterns where certain commentators will misinterpret. They'll take a certain passage almost out of context or too literally, or won't apply it in relation to another one. And so having these other viewpoints really helps you get the full effect of the chapter. Okay. So again, share, like, subscribe. Let me know what you think below. Ask questions, and I'll see you in the next edition of the Academy. Bye bye.